want you each to start a banking business in a different country. One to go and open a house in Paris, one in Vienna, one in London. Choose the most important centers, so that when money is to be sent from here to London, let us say, you won't have to risk life and gold. Hampshire, here in Frankfurt, will just send a letter to Nathan in London saying, pay so-and-so, and that will be offset by loans from London to Frankfurt. Understand? In your day, there will be many wars in Europe. And nations that have money to transport will come to the Rothschilds.
Don't talk anymore, the doctor.
I'm giving advice to our sons, Mama, that the doctor cannot give. Remember, unity is strength. All your lives you must stand by one another. No one brother must be allowed to fail while another brother succeeds. Your 5 banking houses may cover Europe, but you will be one firm, one family, the Rothschilds.
Never wore crowns, but kings borrowed from them. From the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, one man raised 5 sons and planted them like arrows across Europe. They funded emperors, moved armies without lifting a sword, and at Waterloo, they knew the outcome before the cannons stopped. Through banks, bonds, and silence, they built an empire no war could touch.
Hello guys, David Vose here. What a beautiful day here. Oh man, it's nice and warm. It's kind of warm, it's fall warm. No clouds in the sky for once in several days, and I'm having a wonderful day. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Friends, we're going to talk about something that will literally blow your mind. It is about a subject we've talked about before, and you probably know some of this, but there's a great deal of this that you do not know and you need to know. This that you see playing or showing there on the screen is Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise, a Scientologist, an occultist. And we're going to talk about this Baal, where they would sacrifice babies and children. These were ritual balls that they went to. Let me show you something here.
Rothschild family history. This is an antique family photo. A lot of you want to know what it meant. Who was the nanny with the horns? It's not a nanny. It has to do with like this tradition, custom, ritualistic ball. And it's called the Rothschild Surrealist Ball. And it started way back then. Yesterday I told you about their family history and who they are, what they want the world to know. Wikipedia has a whole bunch of stuff on them, but I'm going to tell you what Wikipedia won't tell you. This means something. It's not just a weird costume. Every costume has a lot of symbolic meaning. Rothschilds are real party animals. They have been hosting the weirdest, most elaborate parties for hundreds of years. Hundreds. Someone asked me if that was the nanny. The real question is, do you see how tall that entity is? Keep that in mind. The horned figure has to do with some people called the Chateau. The Chateau are Freemasons from ancient Egypt. The Chateau were the people that helped Amun-Ra escape when there was the Second Pyramid War. You know, when the Anunnaki bloodlines started warring with each other because Marduk wanted to be in command and he wanted to kick out Enlil and Enki, his father and his uncle. All about that. And it also can go back all the way to the lands of Canaan and the worshiping of Baal, you know, the demon with the horns, with the goat head. But every time that they host one of these elaborate balls, you're always going to have someone is wearing horns, a deer head, goat head, horns. There are after-party activities also, which include the ancient tradition of hunting down the stag.
At the hunting parties, they would like they'd have all these expendable children outside in the woods, and usually they have holding grounds, like a tunnel system or something underground where they hold the kids in cages until the time of the hunt. And the hunt usually happens later, once it's dark outside. And so what they'll do is they kind of they'll kind of make a perimeter, which is pretty large, of these woods, and they'll station the different elite people around the perimeter. And then when they give the go, they release the kids, and the kids are told just to run, to hide. And that's when the elite will go through the woods and start hunting for them. When they catch them, a lot of times they will first sexually abuse them, and then they'll kill them. So there was kind of so those were the kids on the outside, and then because we were hierarchy kids, we were on the inside. And so on the inside, usually in the house or the lodge, you would have the older men who were too old. Sometimes it did include women, but they were too old to be out in the woods hunting for the kids. So they brought everything indoors for those individuals. And those individuals were not allowed to kill, but they were allowed to capture and rape the hierarchy children.
Oh boy. Well, that's pretty hard to hear, guys. I guess this lady actually was a witness to all of this and was there, maybe when she was a child. But whether you believe that or not, I'm going to share with you some things today. So I went to AI and did some research, and so here's what's really interesting. I went on AI and asked him about this Amun-Ra battle with Thoth, and I guess Billy Carson's talking about this war that I guess Enlil child was Amun-Ra or something. And he had another kid, and then they had a battle, and Thoth lost the battle and went to America and started the Incas or something, and had gold mines and copper mines and tin mines and silver mines or something. And while he's gone, Amun-Ra's reigning, and then Amun-Ra has another war with something, and then they end up, Amun-Ra's losing the battle and has to get in a spaceship and go back to his home planet or something. So when Amun-Ra leaves, he tells everybody that from now on you will pray to Amun. At the end of every prayer, you will say Amun. And every nation, every religion, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, and Christians all say Amen at the end of their prayer. And so you'll do all things in the name of Amun. Now, some of this is kind of can be divined from various things, even in the Bible. But there's no clear, real idea of this in history. What Billy Carson is getting this from is the emerald tablet of Thoth that is not the original emerald tablet that Sir Isaac Newton translated, nor the supposed emerald tablets previously supposed to have been buried under the Sphinx of Egypt, which the Sphinx is a gargoyle type thing, like in the Bible, the cherubim, which had 4 faces or 4 animalistic characters. That is a symbol of the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. And therefore, when it says that the book of Thoth, or Thought, which is like logos, or, the word that was with the Father from the beginning, and all things came into being through this Thoth, is not literally a real book underneath the Sphinx, but it is underneath the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac written in the stars. It is the astrological story, which is written in the Great Pyramid, which is also then written in all of the ancient myths or creation stories or, scripture. It's the story of the coming of the Messiah and humans coming and incarnating in the whole purpose of man, all written in the stars, incarnating through the houses. So this lady that we saw mentioned this chateau, which she said was some kind of a priesthood. So I thought, okay, how much truth is there in this? And AI did have something to say about this. They said the term chateau does not appear in the provided search results regarding ancient Egyptian priesthood. However, the results do discuss the results for what? Chateau. They discuss the ancient Egyptian priesthood, which was a hierarchical group of men and women who served as servants of the deities. Their responsibility included daily temple rituals, managing temple wealth. Managing wealth for what? For the gods, as you'll see. Preserving cosmic harmony. Matter. Ma'at. Acting as intermediaries between the divine and the human realm. So there was a priesthood that was in charge of the wealth, that had the responsibility in daily temple rituals, intermediaries between the divine and the human realm. And the priesthood was highly stratified with specialized roles, held significant political, economic, and religious influence. Political influence, economic influence, religious influence. They were the divine representatives running our world, the ones who were put in charge. It says the responsibilities and duties, temple rituals. Priests perform daily rituals such as lighting the fire, drawing the bolt, ceremonies to care for the gods' cult statues, including dressing, feeding, and purifying the gods. Cosmic balance. They were responsible for maintaining Mat, cosmic harmony, through rituals ensuring the sun rose and the Nile flooded. Administrative duties. The priests managed vast temple estates, which were often large landowners, collected offerings, and paid and fed temple staff. Political, economic power. High-ranking priests, especially the high priest of Amun, could wield considerable political power, advising the pharaoh and sometimes effectively ruling regions. They controlled the wealth of the temples, which owned a significant portion of arable land. Specialized roles. The priesthood included various specialties, such as wab priests, cleanliness and ritual assistants, lector priests, reciting sacred texts. Interestingly enough, the Jews for thousands of years have been known as scribes, right? And sem priests, funerary rites. Purity and eligibility. Priests had to maintain a high level of ritual purity through washing, shavings, wearing clean linen. Eligibility, both men and women could join. The clergy, though women are more often served female deities. Part-time service. The priesthood was often not a full-time job. Many priests served in rotation and returned to their other occupations when not on duty. Hierarchy. The priesthood was highly stratified, with high priests at the top overseeing all the temple operations. Influence. While the pharaohs were considered the high priests of Egypt, the priesthood amassed great wealth and power that at times rivaled the pharaoh's authority. Now, this is interesting because the same thing's going on in Rome, where you've got Titus Vespasian, and he chooses Josephus, a Jewish priest, to make the history and gave him the official title of Flavius. This is a title that was added to all of the Roman emperors from the Flavian line. And it means something like blue-eyed blonde or something. So there's a lot of little clues there. And by the way, we've talked before about the fact that in the Bible, when Babylon destroyed Israel, first in 720 BC, they came in and took the northern tribes, the Israelites, the nation of Israel, took them to Assyria, and then just strangely enough, nobody ever explains why, they didn't just become slaves to the Assyrians, but they took over the Assyrians or something, and they just went all around the world, over the Caucasus Mountains, over to China and Japan, and down into Africa, and all over to America, and everywhere in the world. They just spread out and colonized. And then, like over 100 years later, in 597 or 587, they conquered the Jewish nation. Not the 10 tribes, but the other 2 nations of the Jews, which had the Levites and the Levitical priesthood of the law of Moses. That, strangely enough, the Apostle Paul says, what superiority hath a Jew? To them belong the oracles. Really? The scribes? They're the scribes? Well, yes, the Levites were the scribes. That's what they did. That's mostly what they did. They weren't the higher priesthood. They weren't the Melchizedek priesthood. They went with the 10 tribes and went all around the world, became Buddhists and Shinto and the Hindu religions, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, and all the other religions. But Judaism with the Levites continued on these carnal commandments. And remember, Judah, to whom belonged the scepter. So they had the scepter, or the right to rule, until he who comes has the legal right. And they had the oracles, meaning they had the scribes. But wouldn't that just be in their own mind, and their own religion, and their own culture? But no, it looks like the Assyrians let them go and didn't put them in slavery. And the Babylonians, when they took them, they took a royal bloodline. And Nebuchadnezzar was of the line of Solomon and Bathsheba. The Queen of Sheba. So it appears that all of these nations knew that this particular bloodline was to rule. It didn't matter if it was in Babylon or China or anywhere else. So the Romans took Josephus, Pliny, the Elder, and certain other Jewish people that would become like scribes for the Romans and write down their history, and took on the Flavius name, like Flavius Titus Vespasian. They gave that family name Flavius to Josephus, Flavius Josephus. He became a royal member of the family. Like, these were the jesters for the king. These were the scribes. These were the eunuchs. These were the people that were mostly trusted by all the different nations that had one of their ruling class that they many times let them rule. I guess in Babylon they were ruling. They were ruling in Assyria. They were, Cyrus was probably one of the Israelites. That's why he was called the Anointed in Isaiah, the Messiah. Sirius or Cyrus is the Assyrian way of saying Osiris, which is also where we get Caesar and the Khazars and the Tsars, or Nebuchadnezzar. So the Tsars of Russia, there were Tsars everywhere of this royal bloodline. And so Europe just readily accepted these Rothschilds to take over the banking. And they just, yeah, go ahead, take her. Oh, we're so stupid, we don't know. Yeah, you could take it. There were all these Ashkenazi Jews that all converted to Judaism, that lived all up down the Rhone and up through into the Germanic territories. And basically, yeah, they created the Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt was Jewish, whether they want to admit it or not. And the Rothschilds were a Jewish family. So they took over Parliament. They even became the kings and queens of England and Britain, which is King Charles and Queen Elizabeth and that line. So why did Babylon take a royal bloodline, as it says in Ezekiel 16 or somewhere, take one of the royal seed to Babylon? And why did other nations take the Egyptians were taking them. They were fighting. The Babylonians, the Greeks, the Egyptians were all fighting over this little bloodline of the Jews that they wanted in their country. The Egyptians were like, yeah, please rebuild Jerusalem down here in Heliopolis, like it was your priesthood. You're the priests. Could it be that there in Goshen, where the Jewish people were for 500 years, right there at the Great Pyramid with the empty tomb, Osiris's empty tomb, could it be that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were this dynasty that were the priests that were, Joseph became a priest, a prime minister, right? And they were like intermediaries between the deities and the people. And they officiated at the great temple. But somehow or another, that priesthood in the days of Ruth, in the book of Ruth, they didn't have any more children. Elimelech and Naomi had no more children. And then this Jew, Boaz, did a Levirate marriage. And then the Jews, after Boaz, became the royal bloodline that had the scepter and that reigned, but they were raising up seed for Joseph. So it's not their right to rule, but they're raising up seed for Joseph. Now, Joseph is the child, the firstborn child of Rachel, and Judah was the lastborn child of Leah. So Yah was the other covenant of death. I believe even in Egypt and in every other nation, they had the two priesthoods of Set, or the darkness, and the priesthood of Osiris, or the light. And at some point, the higher consciousness was so far removed from the lower consciousness, they separated. And the lower consciousness, or the priesthood of the dark side, became the prominent religion. And all the other religions today are relegated to pagans, to nothing. Who cares, right? All we ever study is the Bible in the Western world, or anywhere in the world, and some Greek mythology, which we've said the other day may just be a bunch of made-up history, with Alexander being the defender of the people fighting Darius, the upholder of truth, right? It was just a symbolic clash of it's mythological. Remember, Paul says not only that the Jews were the ones who had the oracles, or the scribes, but they were also, as he said, the ones who made all these genealogies, and they had Jewish fables. And he talked about, we don't go by their Jewish fables. So that word is like myth. So the Old Testament, according to the Apostle Paul, was myth, fables, and genealogies. And the letter of the law, or the Torah, we don't go by. We go by the esoteric meaning. And it was Paul and the apostles who were saying, okay, now we're going to go back to the Gentiles, right? So, but there's this period of time where this little horn arises of this bloodline and gets power over the saints for times, and a half a time, which primarily is just during the tribulation, but also may be kind of a type of their control for the past, from 3.5 years is half of 7. 7 is all of time. So basically the carnal physical existence in this carnal world, where we are going by the conscious mind in the physical world of law and order and carnal commandments, the lower deity reigns, the deity of vengeance. And the Jewish people are evidently the chosen individuals who go into the temple and do the dramas and are teaching the initiation of the mysteries. And it seems like with Hollywood, it's a worldwide initiation where we're all being educated in these evil, dark, demonic forces battling the lighter forces, Batman against Superman, and all of this, psyop going on the theater of war and all this, it seems like it's all been an educational program gone wrong. I think they're apostate is what it is. Because certainly Jesus came and said, you're offspring of vipers, your deity's the devil, and you have no authority in me. You have no power in me. And he wouldn't worship their deity, and he told us all, don't be deceived. Don't listen to them. They're liars. So there is an apostasy, and these Jewish people seem to think that they're still in charge and they're still teaching people. Maybe they're still teaching us all this darkness and this evil because we're still believing it. We've got to come to a place where we no longer want these liars to keep us down in this place of hate and vengeance and reoccurring catastrophes. I think we've learned enough through suffering. Hopefully, we're ready now to move on and truly understand the light, to wake up. But moving on, that was just a side note. But this priesthood, at least from AI's point of view, and from many others, is an intermediary priesthood administering the kingdom of the gods, which, if you think about it, exactly what the Jewish people think they are doing. Their Levitical priesthood is now the Levite. Anton LaVey makes a Satanist church. We've got another Levite that creates the Illuminati, and you can see we saw that the other day. There's a picture of Baphomet. And again, Baphomet is very much like the Sphinx. It's got the 4 animal signs. It's the 4 fixed signs, but it's not the fixed signs. It more or less focuses on the dark side, or the goat of Capricorn. It's their belief that they rule the dark side and the law and keeping men down. So there's where they get this goat head, and this goat is Capricorn, ruled over by Saturn. Saturn is Satan or Set. And Yahweh was always depicted as a mule, as a dumb mule in the temple. When they destroyed it, when Rome destroyed it, they went in and saw that the temple had an idol of a donkey. Now, there are some indications that that animal could have been like a stag or a deer or an elk or some kind of a goat or some bull. It seems like bulls and goats and stags were more domesticated kind creatures, and not necessarily attributed to Yahweh. However, it is attributed to Mother Earth. She's always represented with a deer or a stag. And so it's almost as if these individuals are trying to kill the stag, the children of Mother Earth. They're the darkness represented by this dumb, brute beast that is supposed to be ridden. You put a bit in its mouth. The lower forces are supposed to be controlled, but it goes crazy. And in its violent kicking and goes busting through the fence, and it representing brute force, which should be tamed with a bit in its mouth and ridden, like Christ come into Jerusalem riding on the donkey. He had it controlled, his lower nature. But they want to go after the stag, which is Mother Nature, Artemis, right? The Virgin Mother, Mother Earth. You know, nature, Mother Nature. She's represented by the deer or the stag a lot. So they going out to kill children. It seems like it's a representation of killing Mother Earth and her children. It then seems like they're acting out, and therefore they should know what it means, that their job as the lower ego and this vengeance and law and order is the force and the hate or the lower nature that is designed to torture and plague us. But it was only supposed to represent the fact that humans in their spiritual essence will overcome the lower nature. And yet they've turned it into their job to teach us. Not necessarily, I don't even think to teach us, but to torture us, because that's our lot in life, to be ruled over by these evil, dark forces. We know that one of the things that the Jewish people did, it's there in the Bible all the way through. They always worship Baal. Now, supposedly, their deity didn't want them to worship Baal, but Acts chapter 7 says that they were carrying the tent of their deity Molech. Molech's the one with the horns. And sacrificing to demons. So the Jewish people from the beginning, the whole Torah or the law, the 613 laws, came from Molech, according to Acts chapter 7. And the book of Amos, I think, chapter 5. They worshipped Molech, which is their king, they claim that word means. But it's also this weird-looking, what you would call a god, because the deities were these astrological, half-human, half-animal, half-winged creatures. And these were astrological animals that were ruling over the houses. So these are what the gods were. Each of them had a different face or an animal face. So they were worshiping Satan, definitively. Capricorn, the lowest part of the wheel, because Saturn or Satan was born December 25th at the winter solstice. So this is why they're really big on Christmas. Christmas was originally a day when you there was no law and order, and everybody went around murdering and killing. It was like the purge. There was no law and order. And they could go out during this time and have their ritual sacrifices and gather up the children and let them go running, and then they would hunt them down. The purge or this kind of thing, you've seen it in movies. We also noticed that little clip there about Tom Cruise starred in that movie, Eyes Wide Shut. Remember, Tom Cruise is a Scientologist, and he's, I guess, second to the guy that runs Scientology right now. When he dies, Tom Cruise will be over Scientology. Scientology got started from L. Ron Hubbard, who was the student of Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was a Satanist, beyond any doubt. And one of his students was Anton LaVey, that created Satanism, which is their way of worshiping their deity out in the open. And they love Halloween and this kind of thing. And by the way, as we've said, Charles Taze Russell, who brought these guys over in World War I to build Hollywood, the Aleister Crowley group from Germany, the Germans, he brought the Germans over, and he died on Halloween night, October the 31st, in a Roman toga, doing some ritual. He's got a pyramid on his grave. You guys know about all of this. He's got books. I've got his book here. I just ordered. It's all about the Great Pyramid. And he's got the winged disc symbol all over the books and the crown and the cross. He's very much a Mason, claimed to be a Freemason, and was a Zionist. In fact, Watchtower's announcing Jehovah's Kingdom was a Zionist watchtower, where he was constantly talking about the restoration of the Jews to their land. And he wrote letters to the Rothschilds. He was a royal bloodline himself, Russell. But he was the one who originally brought them over. And then they started this thing over there in Hollywood, there in Pasadena, with Aleister Crowley and the Temple Orientalist or whatever. And they did these rituals there. And we've got all these other people, including the movement to go back to the Law of Moses by Herbert W. Armstrong. And by the way, all the churches were making this plunge back into Judaism and into this apostasy. Let me show you this one clip just to show you one part of it. People keep talking about the Schofield Bible. Well, take a look at this.
Do you guys know about the Schofield Bible? Oh boy, here's a rabbit hole for you. Here's a rabbit hole for all of us. In the early 1900s, right around when the Federal Reserve was founded and the Balfour Declaration happened, right at that exact same time, the Rothschild family hired this dude, this pastor in the Deep South. He made a new version of the Bible called the Schofield Bible. He wrote this new Bible that has all these new interpretations of the text. So they didn't change.
Jewish influence.
Yes, literally, that's where Judeo-Christianity kind of came from. And the idea that Israel is this modern Israel thing is the Israel of the Bible. It came from that Bible. And the Schofield Bible was funded by the Rothschild family. And then it was pushed because they owned the publisher that publishes like all the books. I think it was Oxford Press. And so they had the deals that they could make to get that Bible into all the megachurches across whole denominations of Christianity. And so that was when Christianity got kind of Jewified.
Charles Taze Russell, that started Jehovah's Witnesses, brought these Jews like Aleister Crowley over at that time to create Hollywood. And in Pasadena, California, near Hollywood, is where they would have their ceremonies and rituals. Many of these individuals had temples there. Okay, AI says about this, while Aleister Crowley lived primarily in England, he directed the Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO, internationally, including a chapter in California. This chapter, known as the Agape Lodge, was a lodge, a Masonic lodge, but he had his own, order, was founded in 1935. You see, so they were being brought over here right around the time of before World War I, to get them out of Germany before World War I. And they were moving over here to the New York area, Brooklyn, where Charles Russell was, and he had tunnels going under Watchtower Bible and Tract Society over to the synagogue. And they were connected to all these Jewish people that were in Brooklyn. And they were moving over to Hollywood to build Hollywood. They built pyramid pictures. Russell was into pyramids. And Russell invented the first motion picture. He made the phonograph, the record player, and all of this stuff. And then another group went with Anton LaVey and created, the music industry and flashing the signs and the pyramid signs. All of this is related. But the lodge was founded in 1935 in Hollywood by Wilford Talbot. Talbot's another high up name in the Mormon church, in their priesthood. And it's a Talbot Smith. Huh? Like the Smith family? Joseph Smith? It later moved to Pasadena, where it was led by rocket scientist Jack Parsons, a disciple of Crowley. Okay, so who else could have been in Pasadena of the students of Aleister Crowley? Well, that's weird because Herbert Armstrong, who was trying to get everybody back to the law of Moses, is also headquartered in Pasadena, California. So the Pasadena Lodge, in 1942, the Agape Lodge moved to a mansion at 1003 South Orange Grove Avenue in Pasadena, which became known as the Parsonage. Parsons, his wife, and a group of artists and occultists lived there and held OTO gatherings and rituals. Remember, Aleister Crowley wanted to be the beast. Parsons talked about being the dragon or the beast or something. This is something that happened way back over there in Britain with John Dee and Edward Kelly. They were trying to open up the bottom of the pit and dock to the beast or something and initiate this latter-day torture or classroom or dark occult initiation to the world. Getting Christianity to go back to the law. Remember, Jehovah's Witnesses talk about Jehovah Zionism. They start it, bring them over here. And it ends with Herbert Armstrong, was Herbert Armstrong a student of Jack Parsons or Aleister Crowley? Or, basically all the way back to Russell, who was a Mason and was financed with all this propaganda. Well, let's see. Well, look at this. Yes, Herbert W. Armstrong's church, the Worldwide Church of God, and its school, Ambassador College, were located in Pasadena. They were near the location of Aleister Crowley's Agape Lodge on Orange Grove Boulevard. Herbert W. Armstrong campus and church. In 1947, so this is 12 years after the establishing of the Agape Lodge by Aleister Crowley. So he might very well have himself been a student of Aleister Crowley. We'll see. Armstrong moved his church headquarters from Oregon to Pasadena. He established the campus of Ambassador College along Orange Grove Boulevard, acquiring several mansions from the area known as Millionaires Row. The campus featured both historic homes and modern buildings. The campus, which grew to 50 acres, eventually included the prominent Ambassador Auditorium. Nearby the campus was situated just off the Tournament of Roses parade route, along the same thoroughfare where the Agape Lodge was located. Agape Lodge location, 1942, which is 5 years before 1947, the Agape Lodge moved to a mansion at 1000 S South Orange Grove Avenue, where it was known as the Parsonage. So, shared street. Both Agape Lodge and Ambassador College were situated on Orange Grove Boulevard, although the lodge's location was slightly south of the main college campus. Interesting. Well, who else was there? And I wrote, well, was there any other church, colleges, schools, or church headquarters or buildings owned by any other group or organizations in Pasadena? They say yes. In addition to Herbert W. Armstrong's Worldwide Church of Deity and Ambassador College, several other religious institutions had campuses and properties in Pasadena. Some were even located in Orange Grove Boulevard, near both the college and the Agape Lodge of Parsons and Aleister Crowley. There was the Fuller Theological Seminary. All right, look at Fuller Theological Seminary. Fuller Theological Seminary is a multi-denominational graduate institution, not a church. It is dedicated to equipping men and women for the ministries of Christ and his church. The seminary was founded in 1947 by radio evangelist Charles E. Fuller and Pastor Harold John Okenog. One of the things I noticed about this Fuller Theological Seminary in the Wikipedia in Pasadena is they had several presidents. Remember, it was founded by Fuller, and then his pastor was this Oken guy. And when he died, it says a guy named David Allen Hubbard, a Baptist Old Testament scholar and member of Fuller's third entering class, became Fuller's third president. Well, remember, L. Ron Hubbard was a student of Aleister Crowley, who was in Pasadena at the Parsons Lodge, at the Agape Lodge. So I don't know if this is a relative of L. Ron Hubbard, but they seem to have a small circle. So there were several, and we'll see more here, but this is the Fuller Seminary. So that's interesting that would be right there. And then you've got this Providence Christian College, a Reformed Christian liberal arts college. Providence Christian College relocated to the church building in Old Town, Pasadena in 2018, right next to the Fuller Theological Seminary. Then you've got the Pasadena Presbyterian Church, the All Saints Church, not sure what the All Saints Church is, Orange Grove Friends Meeting. Of course, Friends is, I think, Quaker. Yeah, 1907 by Quakers from the eastern U.S. They got Unitarian Universalist Church, which is very, kind of New Agey, I guess, a little bit. They're on Orange Grove Boulevard. You've got Church of Scientology. Oh, the Church of Scientology of Pasadena. Wouldn't you know it? And then there is the Theosophical Society, which, was also taken over by the financiers of the banks, financiers and all this stuff, and they teach, they don't really elucidate or teach the deep things that Helena Blavatsky was teaching. They're just more or less teaching fluff, your chakras and the auras and the twin flames and all of this. The New Age movement, which is a big part of their MK Ultra mind control PSYOP project operation that they've been putting forward on mankind for the last 100 years or more. So there seems to be quite a few groups, and it seems like a bunch of controversial type churches there. But notice this: Masonic lodges and organizations. Pasadena Masonic Temple looks like a pretty amazing temple. Here is some pictures. I guess this is the auditorium. Look at these chandeliers. There's this. It's a stage. There's a curtain there. United States flag. The Greek Roman type pillars. Very swanky dining area. I guess is probably that same area we were looking at with the chandeliers, but there's a stage where evidently people have dinner with, all these luxurious looking pillars, and they're watching some kind of a show behind the curtain there. Look at how swanky and beautiful that is. Very, 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 very luxurious. Pretty swanky. Looks like a library. Almost like an Oval Office, like they run the world, right? This is a very big place. A lot of symbolism. Training. And this is a major temple, isn't it? You have dances. So that's what that is. It says it was built in 1927 and features a Beaux Arts classicism architecture. In addition to being the meeting place for the Pasadena Lodge 272, it's a well-known event venue for weddings, dances, and other social gatherings, located at 200 South Euclid Avenue. Then it says the Pasadena Lodge number 272. It's one of the oldest lodges in Pasadena, formed in 1883. It's part of the California Freemasonry system. It continues to be active to this day. You've got the Pasadena Scottish Rite, South Pasadena Masonic Lodge, located in the neighboring city of South Pasadena, and other fraternal social organizations. While Freemasonry is a well-known example of a lodge, many other fraternal orders and social clubs also have presence in the Pasadena area. For instance, the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, known for their lodges. The Elks have a presence in many Southern California cities, the Knights of Columbus, and others, I guess. Oh well. But it seems like Aleister Crowley started the temple there. There was Jack Parsons, and one interesting fellow was Herbert W. Armstrong that started this idea of going back to the law, which is what Judaism is all about, of course. He had a Bible college, and his headquarters was in Pasadena, California as well. So whether or not he was a student of this cult there originally, and because each of them, once they would become a student, they would graduate and they would start their own satanic thing. One of them started NASA, Jack Parsons, missile production for the United States, rockets and so forth. And some of them went on to create the CIA and other shadow governments. But this group of individuals came over, and I believe all of these were probably descended from the Rothschild 5 brothers, one of which was Nathan Rothschild, who had illegitimate children with Queen Victoria. And we've talked about this. But they ended up growing up and holding positions of power in all the different countries. You saw that clip where their plan was to go into each of these countries and create banks. And what's not shown there is to create, get control over their congresses or parliaments. So this is interesting. Now, the lady that we saw explaining this, she was talking about this people called the Chateau. I don't know where she gets that. There is no ancient writings that talk about anybody or people from the chateau. Some of this is coming, Billy Carson's lying about a lot of this too. Some of this is coming from a modern work that is very recent. It's a forgery about the Emerald Tablets, and some cockamamie story, I think, is where they're getting a lot of this stuff where Thoth and Amun-Ra have a fight or something, and Thoth, I guarantee Thoth wouldn't lose no battles. Thoth is the ancient personage that ancient ones used to refer to Jesus. But, so, honestly, individuals like this lady or Billy Carson don't know enough about history or scripture or mythology or anything to know any of these stories. And they are lying and exaggerating at best, but taking a lot of their information from novels, or I think some of this information is coming from Stargate. There's a movie where there is an Amun-Ra in that movie, or maybe someone impersonating Amun-Ra in Stargate in Egypt, that flees with the help of some guy named Sam or Sam Carter or something. But that's a movie, and I don't know where any of this comes from. But it's primarily based on these cosmic powers that are battling in these ancient works. They're not. Sitchin did the same thing and made it look like it was some real battle with ancient astronauts and aliens and all this talk of the Galactic Federation and the Draconians and the David Icke and the reptilians. And none of this is true. There are no deities that look like serpents living on Draco. There are no horned deities or deer deities. These are astrological animals that reign over houses in the astrological wheel. They were considered cosmic powers and forces, part of which is the battle between life and death, good and evil, the forces of darkness, the forces of light, this constant battle that goes on in nature, and the fertility rites that goes on in nature. They weren't stories about ancient astronauts. All of this is fake. However, there were priests. The pharaohs themselves were more or less intermediaries between the divine and the human. Now, the Bible itself tells us that. It talks about certain ones all throughout the Old Testament, Yahweh, which is the Sumerian Iyah. Even in the Sumerian text, Iyah was over the earth. Enlil was in heaven. An means heaven, and Lil or El, the god of heaven. But Enki is the earth. And he's from the heavens but came to the earth. And so people think, well, these are astronauts. They're not astronauts. Enki is the lower ego. Iya Anoki, Yahweh, the lower ego. He is the conscious mind who's sent to the earth. His brother is the higher mind, the heavenly deity. And so they're not understanding the connotation or the story or the meaning. It was a cosmic drama, right? It's the divine comedy. But certainly there were individuals that became idolaters. And we know that the Jewish people began to worship Moloch, according to Acts chapter 7, and Sometimes they worship Baal. Baal was a deity primarily up by the Phoenicians. The Jewish people were in the land nearing around the Canaanites. Some of the Canaanites talk about, now remember, none of these ancient peoples worship the devil. Some of them, though, all of them had the pantheon, which were the cosmic powers. In Egypt, they had the temples to Set or Saturn or the darkness, and then they had greater temples to Osiris and Isis and the good deities. But they certainly understood there were dark powers and forces, and there were times of the year that they may have acknowledged the darkness. Maybe there was ideas in ancient times that certain things had to be done to appease the darkness, like maybe you had to work hard to get your food in. This was something we had to do. We were always conscious of the evil in this world. And doing good deeds was the appeasement to the higher nature. But there were times when they would say, well, we're going to take a day and just appease the darkness, and maybe he won't bother us anymore. We won't have any storms, or, these were acknowledgments. They were more, remember, temples had dramas, and they were initiations and teachings. They may have looked crazy like movies today, and I think that's why they do the movies, is to educate us in some way. Like we're all being initiated into some crazy, dark, evil cult. But back in those days, it was to initiate you to become enlightened, to know the difference between darkness and good. They didn't worship the darkness, but they would go and learn about the darkness, and they would honor the light. Almost always, it was the light that was honored. There were changes in the deities. It could have gone that maybe for a long time they worshiped knowledge more. They thought that was more important, and then it moved to maybe love, or other times it was to dedication, hard work. But these were all aspects of the divine. They didn't really separate these. They were all the pleroma, the fullness of the divine that was in all of us, acting out this drama in the temple, which is your body. So this is why Egypt and all the others, mummified the kings, and they would die. They were anointed. They believed they would rise again. And all of these rituals and ceremonies were initiations for the people to understand we were here for a reason, to serve the deities, not to serve them like slaves, like they were aliens coming to, like they had created us and now they want to come back and get our souls. That's not what it was. It was that the divine fullness of the cosmic powers that created the universe had to be understood. And the highest of the creation was man, and these divine cosmic powers dwelled in men. And we needed to understand who we were and begin to wean off from the lower darkness and vengeance and begin to come in tune with our higher nature, which was love and goodness. All the nations understood these things. I don't believe that the Phoenicians, the Canaanites, the Egyptians, or the Jews or anyone originally misunderstood all of these things. What happened was there was idolatry. People didn't understand the deeper meanings because the higher mysteries were done away, and then people just got misunderstanding these things. And evil cults continued these rituals, either themselves not understanding what they originally meant, fantasizing that they were now going to take over in this area. But this bloodline that may go all the way back to some of these Judeans who were probably there in Goshen to more or less serve as priests in the great temple. But they had forgotten all the meanings, and they make idols to these deities, taking them as anthropomorphic beings. And so they were deceived. And who knows, even today, when Tom Cruise is at some party, like eyes wide shut, dressed up like a stag, and they run out and do these ceremonies like the cremation ceremony at the Bohemian Grove. Are they actually killing people, or are they just remembering ancient ceremonies which were really tools to enlighten people and to understand the forces that be? Ultimately, they believe that they know the truth. There is no deity, and it is just these powers, and that we celebrate these powers within ourselves, and that it's partially true as they understand it. And we, the peasants, believe in some idolatry, some religious cult that gets down on their knees and bows to an idol or something. They don't do that. They know that these are mysteries. The only thing is that after all these thousands of years and burning all the books in Alexandria and so forth, do they understand these mysteries? Do they understand the fact that we are in a classroom and that there is a divine purpose and that we are to be attaining a higher status and an exaltation and moving on, that this is a grand priesthood, and that these individuals aren't good enough or haven't spent the time to understand any of it, but are simply going on traditions. Remember when Jesus came, he spoke to the Pharisees, said, you are involved in a tradition, and your traditions make you blind. They're false. You misunderstand the meaning. Go back and reread the Bible, right? You heard it was said, but I say, you do not know what you're talking about. And Jesus himself called these individuals that was running that country, these Judeans, this priesthood, he said, your father is the devil. And he called them offspring of vipers. So there was a symbolism in the Old Testament of this lower nature that was cursed. And that was the lower ego. And it was veiled and put in some kind of ignorance by the flesh. It couldn't see because of the flesh. This is a enlightening initiation into the greater truth, which they probably then lost and could only understand that their deity was this anthropomorphic, angry being, and if you didn't do what he said, they would punish you. They were lost in all of this, and they began to believe, this priesthood, that they were the chosen, and that you were all just peasants, and that these aliens needed your compliance. You were all evil. You were dogs and animals, and the whole universe was created for the pleasure of these, whatever, these other divine dark entities that suck our blood and eat our flesh and manipulate our minds. They feed off of our negative energy. Somehow they've gotten to a place where they probably actually believe this. But anyway, well, we're over now. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. There was some more stuff I wanted to talk about, but, we'll get to it in upcoming videos. Guys, don't fret, don't worry. Be positive, because all that worry and negative is just destroying your health. And it's making your own thoughts more negative. Sing, go out in the woods, go out into nature, look at the flowers and cheer yourself up. And, find that inner powerful being that is not afraid, that is strong and courageous and can go out and help and love others. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening, guys. Lord will bless you. His grace and his peace will always be with you. And we will see you here tomorrow. You guys have a good one.